Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about fake news. Michael Bloomberg tweeted this today. It appears that he made the mistake of reading a Washington Post article and actually believing what they said. Bloomberg wrote, "Extreme heat is killing Americans in record numbers, and that's expected to increase. In Phoenix, where temperatures hit triple digits 103 times in 2019, you can feel the effects of climate change. This is a global crisis, not a local one. We must act now." Wow, 100-degree weather in Phoenix, killing Americans in record numbers, and it's just going to get worse. That sounds really bad. Let's take a look now and see if anything that he said was actually true. If the climate in Phoenix is that bad, people must be leaving there in droves. But wait a minute, Phoenix in Maricopa County is the fastest growing city in the country, and it has been for the past 3 years. Bloomberg is from New York City, where people actually are fleeing in droves, and I would imagine that a lot of the people who are fleeing New York are moving to Arizona. Bloomberg said that people are dying in record rates from the heat. But if we look at actual data, we can see that deaths from all kinds of natural disasters, including heat, are down 90% from a century ago, and this despite the fact that the world's population has tripled. It's almost like the things which Bloomberg read in the Washington Post were fake news. Let's take a closer look at Phoenix now. It's the 5th largest city in the country, and the closest United States Historical Climatology Network station is at Buckeye, just west of the city. From 1893 until 2003, when the station stopped operating, Buckeye averaged 105 days per year over 100 degrees. Let's look at Bloomberg's statement again. He said, "In Phoenix, where temperatures hit triple digits 103 times in 2019, you can feel the effects of climate change. But the long-term average is 105 days a year over 100 degrees. So last year was 2 days less than normal." And the hottest year was 1934, when Buckeye had 138 days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit from March 30th until October 8th. 1934 was also the hottest year on record in the United States in the raw U.S. temperature record. Arizona's record number of 100-degree days occurred in 1958, when Parker had 142 days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit from April 20th until October 18th. And the longest stretch of consecutive 100-degree days occurred in 1978 during the global cooling scare. Parker had 102 days in a row over 100 degrees Fahrenheit from May 28th until September 6th. Bloomberg says 103 total days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in 2019 is evidence of climate change. Not only is this 2 days less than average for the Phoenix area, but in 1978 they had 102 days in a row over 100 degrees at Parker. The year I started college at Arizona State University, 1974, Phoenix had 18 consecutive days over 110 degrees, a record which they've never come close to again. I played on the soccer team at ASU, and we would go out and practice in the middle of the afternoon. Temperatures were typically around 103 or 104 degrees when we started our practice. So far, I'm not feeling very convinced that Bloomberg knows what he's talking about. Bloomberg picked a great day for his tweet, because this date in 1936 may have been the hottest day on record in the United States. The average temperature across the country was 96 degrees. Wisconsin set their all-time record temperature of 114 degrees that day, and Michigan did the same at 112 degrees. Almost 40% of the United States was over 100 degrees on July 14, 1936, and a large portion of the Midwest was over 110 degrees that day. All of the pink dots on this map were over 110 degrees. People were dropping like flies. In Detroit, one person was dying from the heat every 10 minutes. Newspapers on that date, July 14, 1936, were comparing the deaths from the heat to the 1918 flu pandemic. And that's pretty bad. The 1918 flu pandemic killed 100 times as many people around the world as COVID-19. And once again, that was at a time when the world's population was about 1/3 of what it is now. So death rates from the 1918 H1N1 flu pandemic were about 300 times higher than those from COVID-19. So critics are going to say right here that I'm just cherry-picking one day in 1936. We better look at the bigger picture. These graphs are from the National Climate Assessment, and they show heat waves in the United States going back to the year 1900. You can see that it was much hotter in the United States in the 1930s than it is now. This graph I prepared is similar to the ones from the National Climate Assessment, but I show more detail. This shows the June through August average maximum temperature in the United States. You can see that temperatures have been going down, and the 1930s and the 1950s were much hotter than in recent years. And this graph is really interesting. It shows the June through August percent of days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees centigrade. You can see that the frequency of hot days in the United States has dropped by about 50% since the 1930s. Bloomberg claimed that Americans were dying in record numbers from the heat, but we have a lot less heat now and we also have air conditioning. So I don't think his argument is very compelling. Bloomberg made the critical mistake of believing the Washington Post, which is all fake news all the time. If Bloomberg wanted factual information about climate, he'd be better off going to the Babylon Bee, which is normally spot on with their satire about the ridiculous beliefs of the left. Like this article the Babylon Bee published today. U.S. Ecologists are warning we are headed for an environmental disaster as a huge amount of methane has been released into the atmosphere in recent days. The culprit appears to be Goya's Latino Foods, which Republicans rushed out to buy to show their support for Trump. The story is ridiculous, but it's modeled after many fake news stories from the Washington Post and other fake news sources. And speaking of Goya, I'm doing my part to support their business. I love their coconut water, and this was my shopping cart from yesterday afternoon. Toto says buy Goya products, and please visit him on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.